Hey, and welcome to another episode of Pop, Storyboard's podcast on private podcasts. I'm Jeremy Lin, Storyboard's head of customer success. Our guest last month, Catherine Tanucci of Endeavor Airlines, told us about how she brought audio to a workforce that largely doesn't sit behind a desk. Teams that don't have the same level of access to other forms of communication like email, video, or instant messaging. So today, I'm excited to be chatting with another storyboard creator who has done an incredible job of bringing audio to a largely deskless workforce in the trucking industry. And that is Kyle Wiesen of Island Express, a carrier based out of Nebraska that operates throughout the U.S. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
So I want to jump right into it. I know podcasting was a brand new concept for Island Express. Where did this idea come from?
So largely the idea came because we felt like there was a large group or population of our drivers that we really just weren't connecting with. I'll be completely honest, we have been a family-owned and operated business since the 1960s, so we do a lot of things the same way they've always been done, and a lot of that is good because we maintain a close-knit, family-oriented organization. However, that being said, there are just things that need to change and grow in order to, I guess, keep up with the times, keep up with what's going on in our world. So for us, podcast kind of was like an easy thing. It made sense. That's what we could do in order to reach out to the drivers that we felt like maybe we didn't quite have a hold of or, didn't have captive with the information that we wanted to share. So, easy enough, put it, out on a podcast. They can listen to it at their convenience when they're out in the truck. And it just kind of made sense for us.
I know that this is your first experience doing anything with audio or podcasting. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? Was it hard to get going? How is it now?
Honestly, it was very easy. I was a little intimidated in the beginning because I was walking in very blind, not really understanding or knowing what we needed to do or how we could do it. And so there was a learning curve for sure. Everybody at Storyboard was amazingly helpful and answered all of our questions. And we kind of picked it up after the first month or two, and we've been running with it now for almost a year, I think. I can't quite remember, but it just now is very second nature and nothing that I worry about, being difficult or understanding. And even the drivers have caught on, and very simple, very easy program, system to work with and great people to, work with.
That's awesome to hear. You mentioned there were some drivers who communication wasn't getting out to. Can you go a little bit more into that?
Absolutely. We will send messages out over our ELD system, and we do a biweekly newsletter. We try to communicate and stay in front of them with updates and just information about changes and things going on within the company organization as much as we could. However, these are drivers that if they're not coming to the terminal once a week, every couple weeks, they're missing that information and they don't really know what's going on. And so we needed a better way to reach those particular drivers. So the drivers that aren't frequent, visitors to the terminal itself, we needed to be able to reach out and share that same information with them that we do with the drivers who are here on a consistent basis.
Yeah, Kyle, this is a problem that we're seeing more and more of, especially like trucking, logistics, organizations where you're not always going to have that in-person contact. And I think it's a real challenge that you guys are working on. What type of content are you delivering to these folks who are listening?
So for us specifically, what started the podcast and the need for it is we do a monthly safety meeting / kind of company update. So the last Friday of every single month, we have a meeting here at the terminal. Lunch is provided. We try to do anything we can to entice people to come in, but because of schedules and lanes and routes and, conflicts, not everybody can attend. And so, we really want to get that information out to them because we want them to know what our CSA scores are, what areas we need to work on, if there's any changes, any news, any just updates across the company as far as, lanes or rates, or we're very transparent with our drivers, want them to know what's going on with our customers. That's the kind of information initially that, led us to doing the podcast, is keeping all the drivers in the loop of those really important topics. But now that we've kind of got a good handle on that, it's become something that we utilize too as a fun update of sorts. If we need to get something out there that is exciting to share with them. We were nominated to be part of the Best Fleets Hall of Fame. We want to make sure that that's an announcement and not just a message over the ELD. So we can use it for really cool stuff like that as well.
I love that you guys are bringing this to multiple different situations, not only with safety, but elsewhere as well. Has there been anything to show that bringing these safety briefings in a podcast form has changed anything with how aware drivers are of safety or things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's more drivers listening and taking part in those discussions. And so then it becomes really important to them, to speak to other members of the fleet and talk to other drivers about areas that we really need to work on, because it's important for all of us that we have, really good CSA scores and, keep, Grand Island Express in the forefront of being one of the best companies to work for. So now that there's even more drivers that are aware of how we stand in those areas, it, highlights the importance, and those conversations are now happening among the fleet.
Have you been able to see any tangible impact from bringing podcasting to these folks?
Absolutely. We have seen that drivers are more comfortable with the podcast as far as, asking questions and giving feedback. So we put, our podcast out there, and then through that podcast platform, they're able to say, well, what about this or that, and give some feedback, give advice. And, that's a little bit intimidating when you're actually in person in a group of people. They may not necessarily feel confident to speak up and give, that feedback, or to share with us what their thoughts or opinions might be on something, or, just, be a little bit more vocal. So that has been really beneficial for us, that it's kind of opened up that line of communication so that they do feel confident that they can share feedback, give advice, tell us, how it really impacts them, being out there on the road. And we're able to use that and, make adjustments, make changes, because we're constantly seeking ways to improve and make things better for the company as a whole, but especially for the drivers. So being able to actually get that feedback from them has been really, really huge for us.
Is there any of this feedback that you think you've gotten specifically from, maybe it's a driver who hasn't spoken up before, but any of this feedback you've gotten that you don't think you would have gotten if they were in person or using another form of communication?
Yes, because we do find that drivers kind of become apprehensive to share their thoughts or give feedback, because not every company is opening to listen to that, and not every company is accepting of it. So I think that makes them, especially new drivers that come in, until they're fully comfortable with us and, our culture and who we are, they may not feel like they really have a voice, and that we may not be, interested in what they have to say. And so with something like this, we're encouraging them to let us know their thoughts and, what they're thinking about things. And because it's a little less intimidating, and they're not having to necessarily speak up in front of a group of people or be face to face with a member of our management team, then they are a little less fearful, or, like I said before, apprehensive to share, that feedback.
Is there one piece of feedback that's really stood out for you?
So honestly, the things that we get back the most as far as feedback is getting from them, okay, what information helps you feel like where we are as a company? What information, is beneficial for you as a driver to feel like you truly understand, the financial position of the company, why we're making the decisions we're making, our goals, and, what we are doing to achieve those. And it kind of gives a little bit rhyme and reason to some of the decisions that management makes. Because sometimes, they feel a little bit of a disconnect when they're out over the road, that they don't truly understand, well, why was that decision made? And we want them to know, okay, these were the thoughts behind those decisions.
Kyle, I love that example. I think what you're doing with podcasting is really bridging that gap between leadership and people who are out in the field just driving. And I also know from our conversations, it's sometimes a challenge to bring new forms of communications to these types of teams. Is there anything you did to be able to get your drivers out in the field really behind a podcast and get them involved early on?
So something that, always really inspires drivers is, obviously compensating them for it. So part of that safety meeting monthly is, if you attend, not only are we feeding them lunch, but they also receive a $25 monthly safety bonus for attending the meeting. We took that right over to the podcast as well. So for them listening to the podcast as, and actively participating in that by not only listening, maybe answering, asking questions, things like that, we pay the same $25. So what I have found is it's really kind of interesting that if there's any kind of lag in time from when the meeting takes place until, the podcast is available, I'm getting phone calls from the drivers because they want to listen so they know what's going on. And obviously because they want to have that $25 monthly bonus, that becomes really important to them.
I must say, I do love that approach. I will listen to any of your safety briefings at any time, Kyle. So I expect that $25 in the mail next month.
Absolutely.
So, you mentioned feedback, that drivers are leaving feedback through Storyboard. They're sending notes to you. And it sounds like audio has been something that's working really well for you. What do you think you're getting with audio other than feedback that you weren't getting with, say, like video or text communication?
Being able to hear and actively feel like they're a part of what's going on, every single month or however often we are able to, put a podcast out for them. For us, it helps to continue and encourage or, show that our number one priority is to keep that tight-knit, family-oriented culture and to keep everybody really connected and involved. And a lot of drivers come into us with, quite frankly, pretty horrible experiences from other companies. And so when we say, oh, we're family-oriented and that's our culture, they don't necessarily always want to believe that. So when they get here and they actually are seeing these things put into motion of what we are doing to make sure to maintain that really leaves a lasting impact for them. So it's just continuing to make everybody stay, maintain the feeling of that they're really connected and a part of this family, even if they're 1,000 miles away from us.
I love that, Kyle. I think, like, to your point, you guys are operating throughout the United States. Even as a family-operated company, you're not always going to be able to have everybody in the same place at once. So feeling like you're connecting people with audio, I think is really, really cool, and something that I know we've really enjoyed following. Is there anything you've learned about your drivers or the Grand Island Express team in general from doing this podcast?
Honestly, we have learned that there's never too much communication. So although, like, I mentioned, we do our newsletter, we send out messages, there were still so many drivers that felt like they weren't getting the information and that they were missing out and they just didn't really know what was going on. So this was just, even more for them to have available and just another way for us to make sure that they do know what's happening. So, just yet another really great way to communicate. And quite frankly, most of our drivers would rather sit and listen to a podcast than try to read through a newsletter. They might pick it up and peruse through it really quick, but they really aren't going to sit down and focus on the information that's in it. When they hear it as they're driving down the road, they're focusing on that. They're really taking it in. So it definitely gets the information across much better than our previous methods.
And I'm sure, like, you guys probably have people that are tuning in from the road, people that may have been listening to radio or listening to another podcast. And instead of having to go on their phones and look for an email or something, it's as easy as popping it in right in their truck.
Absolutely. And we can email all day, every day. And most of the drivers will say, well, I didn't get an email. So that is just not an effective method. So for us to be able to have our voices heard, while they're driving down the road and in the truck is getting to them way better than any other method.
What would you say to other companies, other carriers, other trucking companies that are thinking about audio? Why is this something they should be doing?
I mean, if you look at your driver population, employee population, it's very diverse. So there's no reason as to why one method of communication is going to effectively work for all of the people that work for you if they're that diverse. So why wouldn't you try to offer a diverse platform of different forms of communication so that everybody is receiving the information the best way possible? And it does give a lot more opportunity, variety, and you may be repeating yourself over those multiple lines of communication, but as long as the message is getting across to your workforce and the people that you want it to get to, why not? I mean, it's just a great method of continuing that open line of communication.
Yeah, and this is a gap we're seeing constantly. It's not one size fits all in communication. There are a lot of different ways you can be communicating with people. So the fact that, there are still going to be people that I'm sure check your newsletters even if they're driving, but having this additional way that's convenient and something that can fit in someone's pocket is really helpful.
Absolutely. And, it is something that is very much part of what our world is coming to as far as, how people receive information. So if you're not staying up, to speed with that and not really, keeping up with the ways that people are, receiving different forms of information now, you're going to fall behind. And we want to make sure that we're always up to speed and really delivering and getting, what we need to our people.
So I want to talk a little bit about what the future looks like here. I know that there are a lot of opportunities to grow this channel. Are there things you're not podcasting about today that you think you could start here in the next 6 months?
Absolutely. That has been on our must-do list for a bit now. We're in a very big growth pattern right now, or I guess growth spurt. And so that is something we're working to add to as far as we do a lot of informational stuff right now, but we've had a lot of feedback from our drivers that they really like, some of the fun stuff that we do. We tried an avenue that we did kind of a top 10 thing each week, and the drivers really, really enjoyed it. And just for lack of time, we haven't really kept up on it. But I do know within the next several months, we're going to enhance that podcast and do just, make it a little bit more fun, give the drivers something that's just fun to listen to. And again, our culture is family, but it's also a lot of fun. And so we want to make sure that we can give them a little bit of variety and give them that too, and not purely just informational.
I love that. I think this podcast does not have to be just what a driver needs. It can be what they want to hear, something interesting that they can listen to on the road. On the topic of fun, I have to ask Kyle, are there any podcasts you listen to in your free time?
I don't necessarily. We have a lot of people here in the office that listen to some of the trucking podcasts. And I always think that I want to make sure and, start doing that. But I only have about a 7-minute commute to work. So there's just not a lot that I can get in that 7 minutes. So it is something that I definitely would like to get involved in a little bit more and start doing a little bit more as far as listening in.
I have a few 5-minute podcasts I've done in a previous life. After this, I'll be sure to send those to you. No self-promotion at all, of course.
No, that would be awesome. Yeah, because I love them and I've started a few, but I went from, at one point I had a 45-minute commute to work to when we relocated to this area, I literally have a 7-minute commute. So you miss out on so much opportunity for things like that.
Well, Kyle, thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think what you guys have done with drivers is phenomenal. And these different elements that you continue to bring into it are really going to change the game. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for always being such, a wonderful organization to work for. I really appreciate everything you've done for us too.
At Storyboard, we have plans for all different sizes of organizations and teams with free, pro, and enterprise level subscriptions. To learn more or to request a demo, visit us on the web at trystoryboard.com. and follow us for updates on LinkedIn and via Twitter at storyboard_FM. We'll be coming to you next month with another episode. See you then.